Welcome to Jargon, a podcast bringing clarity to commonly misunderstood business concepts. We're debunking and simplifying the buzzwords and ideas plaguing today's business world and offering a fresh perspective on these topics.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Jargon. My name is Todd Boutte, and I'm joined today by one of our senior consultants, Natalie Romero. And Natalie and I want to talk to you guys a little bit about data models and reporting strategy. Now, more specifically, Natalie, what are we hitting on today?
Yeah, we're here to talk about why it's best practice to develop a data model and a reporting strategy so early on in a system implementation. So essentially, this could be ERP implementations, HR, payroll systems, contracts, supplier management systems, anything that you're putting data into and you want to get reports out of.
So these data models and establishing a reporting strategy, we don't find those to be typically prioritized in selections and implementations. And the reason we put such a heavy emphasis on doing this early is, well, because of a couple of things that we want to talk about. So why don't you introduce those?
Yeah, so really three key things that we want to talk about today and three reasons why we believe it's best practice. One, ensuring that the system design aligns with business goals and it's built to meet business requirements. Secondly, is ensures that the data is set up correctly from the beginning. This allows for consistent and reliable reporting on the back end. And lastly, and I think this is one of the biggest points here, is it prevents rework down the line once you go live.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into those kind of one at a time for sure. But before we do kind of too much down that work, what's a data model? What is this?
So really just in my own terms, a data model defines how the data is structured, stored, and accessed within the system. It really serves the basis for reporting, for financials, operations, compliance, and so on.
Right. So data structure, simple, some examples might be just Excel files, right? Some people dump everything in Excel. Databases of a variety of kinds are usually behind some software, so that's another example. Other times we have just completely unstructured data, and these are things, depending on your industry, may or may not be too common, but design files, images, video recordings, any number of things in unstructured data. So that is an absolute must in kind of determining with a client what type of data they have and where do they keep it. And so building on that, what we want to do is get into how they access it. What part does it play in their day-to-day? How do we do that?
Yeah, so I would say that everything that we do starts with interviews. All of our projects, sitting down, interviewing key stakeholders, documenting business processes and gathering requirements from what they're looking for from a reporting standpoint. And so walking into some types of information or questions that we could ask for in these interviews to help build a data model would be any report names, what's the use for it, the purpose, what could be the department that's going to be using it? Is it cross-functional? Is it just one department? Any key data elements within that. System sources, is it coming from one system, two systems, or no systems at all to this day? Mm-hmm. A big component is the owner, who's going to be the owner for this data from an integrity and structure standpoint. And this kind of walks into another point that later down the line, this helps us set up security rules around these key data elements within the system. And lastly is timing. What is the cadence for this reporting? How often do you want to see it, or how often do you need to see it to make key business decisions? And so these are some types of questions that we'll ask in these key interviews to help build the data model. And kind of thinking of another thing is in these meetings as well, we'll ask key stakeholders to prioritize and identify the nice to haves in the reports that they're providing for us and what they want to see. Because there may not be the capacity to build all these reports at once, and sometimes it's best to build some of these reports after go live.
Yeah, so during this phase of a project, this is the time where we hear all about the data I want is broken, or I do this and it takes me half my day to do this once a month. This is the kind of stuff that we get out of clients very organically. So like you said, it all goes back to the interview. We just want to talk to you about your processes. Tell us your priorities. Tell us your pain points, and we'll take care of the conversion of that into a formalized data model. Mm-hmm. So the outputs here are typically going to be a big matrix of this type of data lives here. It's accessed this often by who's the data owner, what are the security roles, the database names, on and on and on. And then I really like to have a bigger visual representation of how data flows through a company provided as well. So we'll do a system architecture with the bigger pieces, and then we'll have data models and submodels when necessary for how data moves between departments, between systems, what things do data conversions, where does it ultimately end up, and who touches it, etc. So we do all of that in service of actually being able to get clients reports that they want in the end, right? And so this feeds into what we call reporting strategy, really defining from end to end what reports exist. And I think that's usually where we start, right? The name of this report is, and we take it down from there. So everything up to this point really is to help make sure that these reports are meeting business requirements, pretty much checklists, right? This report does this, it shows this number. But there's a bigger story here than that. We want to make a reporting strategy and the reports within it align with business's goals, right? So, how do we help a client define that or deliver that to us?
Yeah, I would say a big component in any project that we do is at the beginning, sitting down with key executive stakeholders and understanding what are their short-term and long-term goals for the company. Where do they want to be a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now? And ultimately, the things that we find out in those interviews are what drive essentially the rest of the project.
Yeah, that's right. And we can't overlook the impact of those in any aspect, including the reports. And it's pretty simple if you just kind of bring logic to the table and say, well, if I can't get data on where I am now, then I have no reliable way to measure it against where I want to be in the future. So that is often a big part of what we're doing when we're building reports, is thinking about what are the data points that help our clients meet their goals. So as we move on kind of how this system aligns with goals and how it meets the requirements, what are the other key components we're looking for in building this reporting strategy?
So kind of going into the second point of why it is best practice to develop this data model and reporting strategy so early on is to ensure that the data is properly set up from the beginning. So we went through this process of aligning the design with business goals, creating the data model, but really now our role in these projects, especially within the build phase, is ensuring it's getting set up correctly. We're vigorously testing the system, running through transactions through the test environment to see what the output looks like.
Yeah, I mean, the data is no good if it's not correct, right? And, similarly, it's no good if you can't get to it when you need it. So reliable, consistent reporting has to be the foundations for getting reliable and consistent reporting have to be put in place from the get-go. Sometimes this involves additional infrastructure you didn't plan for in the initial part of your selection. And you'd like to know that now so you can better budget, get better resources assigned to making sure it's possible so that when you get to an implementation, you're ready to go, or you feel more prepared to enter that implementation phase, and there's not a lot of questions around how you're going to get back at this data. Inevitably, implementations come with unknowns. This is the step where we're trying to minimize the number of unknowns as we go into the reporting, so that when we do testing, it's a matter of validating some financial data, maybe doing some tweaks, getting the scheduling of the reporting down, getting it running quickly without bogging down systems, making sure people have the right access, on and on and on, right? We're in kind of a strictly testing phase. And that's only possible when the data has been set up correctly from the beginning.
Yep.
Right? So all of that to avoid number 3, right? What's
Yes.
number 3?
Point number 3 is preventing rework. So developing the data model and reporting strategy late in the process can result in significant rework if the system was initially designed without the proper consideration of reporting needs and business requirements. And so kind of before we jump into this a little bit more, I just want to touch on the fact that we know that with every system implementation that we've worked on here at Trinergy, and knowing that we have done a lot, there is a portion where you do revisit the data model after going live. So really recognizing that there is a refinement process in the back end. Once you go live, new processes may develop, new information may be discovered. You're learning how to use the system, different data elements that can go into it. So it is expected that after go live, there is a refinement process for this. But if you don't do it well enough early on in the process, it could be that you're coming back after go live and completely scrapping the system, having to reset it up. Maybe you developed customizations during implementation that you thought you would need but you didn't properly scope it or establish the reporting requirements, and then you're going into go live and it's a customization that's not even going to help you. So just lots of things to take into consideration when thinking about this rework.
Yeah, a period of refinement is far different than kind of having to start from scratch, obviously. And when we speak to those refinements after go live, these are generally minor. If your foundations are good, they're usually small things, maybe changing different access or adding an additional dimension to a report or a new graph, or something is calculated as a decimal rather than a percentage. Or in the case of a client I had, they had reports that had millions of barrels of oil on them, right? You need to bring those numbers down. Let's divide this whole column by 1,000, please, right? So those are the types of refinement you usually want to be dealing with during an implementation go live period, and not, oh my God, we can't get at this whole subset of data and we blew it. Now, why is this so important? It's simple. It's one word. It's money, right? This is time and money. Big expense can be had going into reworking reports, unfortunately. So anyway, that's maybe a point that's belabored, but we really find this to be a critical phase in kind of our selection, and we like to put this early for all those reasons. Now, we have a lot more documentation around this on our website. We love to write. There's lots of articles here. We love to talk to you guys too. So if you have questions for us anytime, please email us, reach us through the website, anything we can do for you at all. Thanks so much for sharing your experience with us, Natalie. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Todd.